The veterinarian shouts, "Stop! We can't do this!" What happened to the dog after left everyone in the clinic in tears. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine floors of Monte Sereno Veterinary Clinic as Dr. Augusto Reynolds prepared for what seemed like another ordinary day. The clinic, a modern two-story building nestled between ancient oak trees, had been his life's work for the past 20 years. The walls, adorned with photos of successfully treated animals, told stories of countless lives saved and families made whole again. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. Dr. Louisa Carter, his young assistant veterinarian, was organizing supplies in the treatment room when the familiar chime of the front doorbell echoed through the clinic. The sound was followed by urgent footsteps and a man's desperate voice calling for help. "Please, someone help! I found him on the highway." The man burst into the reception area, cradling a large, unconscious German shepherd in his arms. The dog's golden brown fur was matted and dirty, his breathing shallow and labored. Louisa rushed forward immediately, her trained eyes taking in the dog's condition. "Bring him to the examination room," she directed, leading the way. Dr. Augusto emerged from his office, his experienced gaze narrowing as he assessed the situation. The man, dressed in expensive business attire that seemed out of place for someone who had supposedly rescued a stray dog, placed the animal carefully on the examination table. "I was driving when I saw him collapsed by the roadside," he explained, running a hand through his disheveled dark hair. "He wouldn't have survived much longer out there." Dr. Augusto began his examination while Louisa gathered vital signs. The dog was severely dehydrated and running a high fever, but something about his condition didn't quite align with the story of a stray animal. His nails, though dirty, showed signs of regular maintenance, and despite his current state, his muscle tone suggested he had been well cared for until recently. "Does he have a name?" Louisa asked, noting the absence of a collar. "Max!" the man replied quickly, then caught himself. "I mean, there was a tag, but it fell off when I picked him up. It said Max." Dr. Augusto and Louisa exchanged a brief glance. The man's story seemed to change with each telling, and his nervous energy filled the room with an unsettling atmosphere. As they worked to stabilize Max's condition, Dr. Augusto noticed something else: peculiar scarring patterns along the dog's legs and abdomen. They weren't typical injury marks. They appeared methodical, almost surgical in nature. His 30 years of veterinary experience told him these weren't accidents or street fights. "We'll need to run some tests, Doctor," Augusto announced, his tone professional but firm. "And we should check for a microchip. Many owners—" "No time for that," the man interrupted, pulling out a thick envelope from his jacket. "The dog needs immediate surgery. Whatever it costs, I'll pay double, triple even. Just do it now." Louisa, who had been monitoring Max's vital signs, spoke up. "Sir, we need to understand what we're dealing with before we can perform any surgery. Standard protocol." "To hell with protocol!" The man's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing a flash of something darker beneath. "Every minute we waste talking could be fatal." Dr. Augusto stepped forward, his tall frame and calm demeanor commanding attention. "Mr." He paused, realizing the man hadn't provided his name. "Parker. James Parker," the man supplied, though he seemed to hesitate before saying it. "Mr. Parker, I understand your concern, but rushing into surgery without proper diagnostics could do more harm than good. We need to stabilize him first and run some basic tests." "It won't take long." The man, Parker, checked his phone nervously, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but please hurry." As Louisa prepared to draw blood samples, she noticed Max's eyes flutter open briefly. Despite his weakened state, there was an intelligence in those amber eyes that caught her attention. He looked at her with an awareness that seemed almost human before slipping back into unconsciousness. Dr. Augusto began the preliminary examination, his experienced hands moving carefully over Max's body. When he reached the dog's shoulder area, his fingers detected something under the skin, the telltale bump of a microchip. Rather than announce his discovery, he caught Louisa's eye and gave a subtle nod. Parker paced the examination room, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor tiles. Every few minutes he would check his phone, send a quick text, and resume his pacing. His behavior was setting off every warning bell in Louisa's mind. As they worked, the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, streaming through the windows and illuminating particles of dust that danced in the air. Outside, Monte Sereno was coming to life. The small town's residents beginning their daily routines, unaware of the drama unfolding within the walls of the veterinary clinic. Little did they know that this seemingly simple case of a rescued dog would soon unravel into something far more complex, challenging everything they thought they knew about their quiet community. The arrival of Max was about to set in motion a chain of events that would test their courage, their principles, and their understanding of just how far some people would go to keep their secrets buried. While Parker continued his restless pacing in the waiting room, Dr. Augusto and Luisa focused on investigating Max's condition in the examination room. The scanner had confirmed the presence of a microchip, but what they discovered next left them both puzzled and concerned. "This is strange," Dr. Augusto muttered, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "The chip's code format doesn't match any standard registration system I've seen before." His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, checking various databases, but each search came up empty. Luisa leaned closer to the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. Could it be from another country, she suggested, but even as she spoke, she knew something wasn't adding up. The chip's sequence was unlike anything in their international database. As they conducted more detailed examinations, the mysteries surrounding Max only deepened. The blood work revealed traces of unusual compounds that didn't match any common medications. More disturbing were the perfectly symmetrical scars hidden beneath his fur, suggesting systematic procedures rather than accidental injuries. "Dr. Augusto," Luisa whispered, ensuring her voice wouldn't carry to the waiting room. "Look at these patterns." She gently parted Max's fur, revealing a series of small, precise incisions that had healed over time. "These weren't made on the street. They're too clean, too methodical." The senior veterinarian's expression darkened as he examined the marks. In his 30 years of practice, he'd seen all kinds of injuries, but these were different. They reminded him of something he'd rather forget, a case from his past that still haunted him. "Run a full toxicology panel," he instructed, his voice barely audible, "and check for any trace markers that might indicate experimental compounds." Just then, Max's eyes fluttered open again. Despite his weakened state, his gaze was remarkably alert, focusing first on Luisa, then shifting to Dr. Augusto. There was something in those amber eyes. A silent plea, perhaps, or a warning. The dog's behavior was equally puzzling. Despite his obvious distress, he showed no signs of aggression. Instead, he exhibited an unusual level of awareness, following their movements with an almost human-like comprehension. When Luisa approached with a syringe for additional blood samples, Max extended his paw without prompting, as if he understood the procedure. "I've never seen anything like this," Luisa admitted, carefully drawing the blood. "It's almost as if he's been trained for medical procedures." A commotion from the waiting room interrupted their discussion. Parker's voice carried through the door, his tone increasingly agitated as he argued with someone on his phone. "Need more time." "No, you don't understand. They're running tests. I can't just..." Dr. Augusto and Luisa exchanged glances. The man's behavior had been suspicious from the start, but now his anxiety seemed to be reaching a breaking point. Through the window, they could see him pacing more frantically, his expensive suit showing signs of distress from his constant movement. The preliminary blood work results began printing, and Luisa's eyes widened as she read the report. Dr. Augusto, these readings, they're off the charts. Look at these molecular markers. I've never seen anything like them. Before they could discuss the findings further, a gentle knock at the clinic's front door drew their attention. Through the glass, they could see Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, an elderly resident well known in Monte Sereno for her dedication to animal welfare. She often brought treats to the strays in the neighborhood and knew virtually every pet in town. Parker's reaction to her arrival was immediate and stark. He quickly turned away, pulling his phone out again and walking to the far corner of the waiting room. Mrs. Thompson entered, her kind face lighting up as she greeted the receptionist, but then she froze, her eyes fixed on the examination room window where Max was visible on the table. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. "That can't be, but it looks just like—" Dr. Augusto stepped into the waiting room, intrigued by her reaction. "Mrs. Thompson, is everything all right?" The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears as she pointed toward Max. "That dog. He looks exactly like Benjamin's pet. The one that disappeared when—" Her voice trailed off, heavy with emotion and unspoken implications. The name Benjamin seemed to trigger something in Parker. His phone call ended abruptly, and he stood straighter, his attention now fully focused on Mrs. Thompson. The tension in the room became palpable as past and present seemed to collide in this unexpected moment of recognition. Meanwhile, in the examination room, Luisa noticed Max's reaction to Mrs. Thompson's voice. The dog's ears had perked up, and despite his weakness, he was attempting to lift his head, his tail giving a feeble wag. It was the first emotional response they'd seen from him since his arrival. The mystery surrounding Max was deepening with each passing moment, and with each new piece of information, the stakes seemed to grow higher. What had started as an emergency case was rapidly evolving into something far more complex, something that connected a missing young man, a mysterious dog, and secrets that some people seemed desperate to keep hidden. Dr. Augusto led Mrs. Thompson to his office, away from Parker's increasingly suspicious gaze. The elderly woman's hands trembled as she sat down, her eyes still fixed on the examination room window where Max lay. "Benjamin was such a bright young man," she began, her voice quavering with emotion. "He worked at that big pharmaceutical company in the next town, New Life Pharmaceuticals, always talking about making the world better." She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Then one day, both he and his dog vanished. The police said he probably just moved away, but I knew Benjamin. He would never leave without saying goodbye." In the examination room, Luisa continued analyzing Max's blood work results. The chemical compounds she'd identified were unlike anything she'd seen before. They appeared to be experimental derivatives of existing medications, but with molecular structures that suggested they were designed for something far more complex than routine treatment. "These compounds," she muttered to herself, making detailed notes. "They're like pharmaceutical building blocks, but modified." Her voice trailed off as she noticed Max watching her intently, his intelligent eyes following her every movement. Suddenly, the door burst open. Parker strode in, his earlier nervous demeanor replaced by barely contained anger. "I've waited long enough. Either you perform the surgery now, or I'm taking the dog elsewhere." Dr. Augusto emerged from his office, his calm presence filling the room. "Mr. Parker, we've found some concerning abnormalities in Max's blood work. Before we proceed with any treatment, we need to understand what we're dealing with." The dog was on the street. "He could have gotten into anything," Parker snapped, reaching for his phone. "I'll call another vet." But as he moved toward Max, the dog's demeanor changed dramatically. For the first time since his arrival, Max showed signs of distress, backing away despite his weakness. His eyes, previously calm and observant, now reflected fear and anxiety. Louisa stepped between Parker and the examination table. "Sir, as medical professionals, we have a duty of care. These test results show clear evidence of systematic exposure to experimental compounds. This isn't something that happens by accident." Parker's face paled slightly, but he quickly recovered. "You're making assumptions based on incomplete data. I found this dog on the highway, nothing more. Now, are you going to help him or not?" Before anyone could respond, Mrs. Thompson appeared in the doorway. Her eyes widened as she got a closer look at Max, and she gasped audibly. "Those marks on his leg? Benjamin showed me similar marks on his dog just days before he disappeared. He said something about unauthorized testing, but he was so scared to talk about it. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Parker's hand tightened around his phone, his knuckles turning white. Dr. Augusto noticed the subtle shift in his stance, like a cornered animal preparing to flee. "Mr. Parker," Dr. Augusto said carefully, "I think it's time you told us the truth about Max. These chemical compounds in his system, the surgical scars, the unregistered microchip, they all point to something far more serious than a stray dog found on the highway." Louisa had been quietly moving toward the clinic's phone, but Parker noticed. "Don't," he warned, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in. Sometimes it's better to just treat the dog and forget about asking questions." But Dr. Augusto stood firm. "I've seen cases like this before," he said, his voice heavy with past regrets. "Years ago, I ignored my instincts when a similar case came in. I trusted the wrong people, followed their instructions without questioning. The animal didn't survive, and I've carried that guilt ever since. I won't make the same mistake twice." The tension in the room was interrupted by a sharp beeping from the monitoring equipment. Max's vital signs were fluctuating dangerously. The stress of the situation seemed to be affecting him, but there was something else. The chemical compounds in his system were causing an unexpected reaction. "He needs immediate stabilization," Louisa announced, already preparing emergency medications. But as she reached for a standard sedative, Dr. Augusto stopped her. "Wait," he said, studying the latest blood work results. "These compounds in his system, they could interact dangerously with normal medications. We need to understand what we're dealing with first." Parker moved toward the door, his composure cracking. "You're making a huge mistake. There are people who won't be happy about this interference. Are these the same people who might know something about Benjamin's disappearance?" Mrs. Thompson asked boldly, years of suspicion giving her courage. The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Max, despite his deteriorating condition, remained alert, his eyes moving between the humans as if following their conversation. The dog's intelligence seemed to grow more apparent with each passing moment, suggesting that whatever had been done to him went far beyond routine experimentation. Dr. Augusto made a decision. "Louisa, prepare the isolation ward. Mrs. Thompson, please stay. We'll need your statement. And Mr. Parker," he turned to face the increasingly agitated man, "I think it's time we contacted the proper authorities about this situation." Parker's hand moved swiftly to his jacket pocket, pulling out his phone. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, his fingers flying over the keypad. "I'm calling my lawyer. You have no right to hold this dog." Dr. Augusto remained unmoved. "Actually, as veterinary professionals, we have both the right and the obligation to report suspected animal abuse and unauthorized experimentation. The evidence we've gathered here today more than justifies our concerns." While the confrontation unfolded, Louisa was carefully monitoring Max's vital signs. The dog's condition had stabilized somewhat, but the unusual compounds in his system were causing unpredictable fluctuations. As she worked, she noticed something even more intriguing. Max's responses to certain stimuli seemed almost calculated, as if he was consciously controlling his reactions. "Dr. Augusto," she called softly, "you need to see this." She pointed to the monitor displaying Max's neurological readings. The patterns were unlike anything they'd seen in a canine patient before. Mrs. Thompson had settled into a chair near Max, gently stroking his fur. "Benjamin used to talk about his work at New Life," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He was so excited at first, said they were doing groundbreaking research, but then something changed. He became nervous, started looking over his shoulder constantly." The mention of New Life Pharmaceuticals triggered another reaction in Max. His ears perked up and his heart rate increased noticeably. Louisa quickly checked his vitals again, but this time she saw something else. Hidden beneath a patch of fur near his shoulder blade was a tiny mark, not a scar, but what appeared to be a small tattoo. "L3117, she read aloud, carefully parting the fur to get a better look. "It looks like some kind of identification code." Parker's face drained of color. Before anyone could stop him, he was already dialing another number on his phone. "We have a situation." He spoke urgently into the device. "Protocol breach at location 3. I need immediate assistance." Dr. Augusto moved quickly to the clinic's security panel, engaging the electronic locks on all exterior doors. "I think we'll all stay right here until the authorities arrive," he said firmly. "Louisa, document everything. Photos, blood work, all of it." The young veterinarian was already ahead of him, her camera carefully capturing images of Max's unusual markings and the mysterious tattoo. As she worked, she noticed something else, a pattern to the surgical scars that seemed to follow specific neural pathways. "These aren't random experiments," she realized aloud. "They're targeted modifications, following the nervous system. But why? What were they trying to achieve?" Max's eyes met hers, and for a moment Louisa felt a chill run down her spine. The intelligence in those eyes seemed almost supernatural, as if the dog understood exactly what she was saying and thinking. Mrs. Thompson suddenly sat up straighter. "The last time I saw Benjamin," she said, her voice gaining strength, "he was trying to tell me something about their research. He said they'd made a breakthrough, but that it wasn't what anyone expected. He was scared, said they'd gone too far." Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles broke the tension. Parker's face showed a mix of relief and triumph. "That'll be my lawyer," he said confidently, "and some representatives from New Life who can clear up this ridiculous situation." But when Dr. Augusto looked through the window, he saw something different. Local police cars, their lights flashing silently in the late morning sun. Alongside them was a vehicle he didn't recognize, marked with federal agency insignia. "Interesting lawyer you have there, Mr. Parker," he said dryly, watching the man's expression change. "Seems we're not the only ones interested in what's been happening at New Life Pharmaceuticals." Louisa continued her examination of Max, documenting every unusual finding. The dog's blood work had revealed something else, markers that suggested genetic manipulation at a level far beyond anything that should have been legally possible. "Dr. Augusto," she called out, her voice urgent. "These results, they're showing signs of human DNA markers integrated into his genetic structure. How is that even possible?" The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mrs. Thompson gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Benjamin's last message to me," she whispered. "He said they'd found a way to bridge the gap between human and animal consciousness. I thought he was just being poetic, but..." Max's eyes seemed to glow with an inner light as he looked from face to face, his expressions changing with an almost human-like awareness. The truth about what had been happening at New Life Pharmaceuticals was beginning to emerge, and it was far more extraordinary and terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The federal agents entered the clinic with practiced efficiency, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the room. The lead agent, a tall woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, introduced herself as Agent Sarah Chen. "We've been investigating New Life Pharmaceuticals for months," she explained, her gaze fixed on Parker, who had backed himself into a corner. "But we never expected to find such direct evidence in a small-town veterinary clinic." Dr. Augusto and Luisa quickly briefed the agents on their findings, sharing the blood work results and photographs of Max's unusual markings. Agent Chen's expression grew increasingly grave as she examined the evidence. "The L317 marking," she said, studying the photos. "It matches our intelligence about New Life's classified research program. We've had whistleblower reports about experimental genetic manipulation, but until now, we've never found concrete proof." Parker remained silent, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Two agents stood beside him, carefully monitoring his movements. His phone had been confiscated, and his attempts to contact his superiors had been thwarted. Meanwhile, Luisa continued her examination of Max, now assisted by a federal veterinary specialist who had arrived with the agents. The specialist, Dr. Marcus Wong, was visibly amazed by what he was seeing. "These genetic markers," he muttered, reviewing the test results. "They're using a completely revolutionary approach to DNA integration. The sophistication of these modifications is years ahead of anything that's publicly known." Mrs. Thompson had been allowed to stay, as her connection to Benjamin made her a potential witness. She sat near Max, providing a comforting presence that seemed to help keep him calm despite the chaos around him. "Benjamin knew," she said softly, stroking Max's fur. "He discovered what they were really doing at New Life, didn't he? That's why both he and his dog disappeared." Agent Chen nodded slowly. "We believe your friend Benjamin Stevens was on the verge of exposing everything. He was part of New Life's genetic research team, but according to our sources, he began to have ethical concerns about the direction of their experiments." "The compounds we found in Max's system," Luisa interjected, pointing to the latest test results. "They're not just random experiments, they're part of a systematic attempt to enhance cognitive function. But the level of sophistication suggests they've done this before, many times before." Dr. Augusto, who had been studying Max's behavior, made another observation. "Look at how he's responding to our conversation. The way he tracks the discussion, his reactions to specific words and names. This isn't just enhanced animal intelligence. This is something entirely different." Max's eyes seemed to confirm this assessment, showing an awareness that became more apparent with each passing moment. When Agent Chen approached him with a specialized scanner, he voluntarily positioned himself to give her better access to his embedded chip. "The chip's encryption," Agent Chen announced after a moment. "It matches the signature we found in Benjamin's personal files. He must have modified it himself, perhaps trying to leave a trail of evidence." Suddenly, Max began pawing at Mrs. Thompson's handbag, his actions deliberate and insistent. Confused but trusting, she opened it, and Max carefully withdrew an old photograph she kept there, a picture of Benjamin with his dog from 2 years ago. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the photograph. The dog in the picture was identical to Max, but what caught everyone's attention was a detail in the background, a whiteboard covered in complex chemical formulas, partially visible behind Benjamin's smiling face. Dr. Wong leaned in to examine the photograph. "These formulas," he said, his voice filled with awe, "they're related to consciousness transfer theories. There were rumors in the scientific community that New Life was working on something revolutionary, but they weren't just trying to enhance animal intelligence," Luisa realized, the pieces finally falling into place. "They were trying to find a way to transfer human consciousness. But why, and what happened to Benjamin?" Max's reaction to Benjamin's name was unmistakable. He moved to the computer keyboard in the examination room and, to everyone's astonishment, began pawing at specific keys with deliberate precision. On the screen, letters slowly appeared. HELPBEN. The implications of this simple message sent shockwaves through the room. Agent Chen immediately began issuing orders into her radio, calling for additional support and resources. The case had just evolved into something far more complex than anyone had imagined. Parker, watching this display, finally broke his silence. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said, his voice trembling. "What New Life achieved, it wasn't supposed to be possible. When Benjamin threatened to expose everything, they had to act. But they never expected—" He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd said too much. Dr. Augusto and Louisa exchanged glances, their years of veterinary experience providing no framework for what they were witnessing. In their small clinic in Monte Sereno, they had stumbled upon what might be the most significant scientific discovery and potentially the biggest scandal of the century. And at the center of it all was Max, a dog whose extraordinary abilities suggested that the boundary between human and animal consciousness had been irrevocably breached, raising questions that would challenge the very foundations of scientific and ethical understanding. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows, the investigation had transformed the quiet veterinary practice into a hub of intense activity. Federal technicians had set up specialized equipment to analyze Max's unique conditions, while Agent Chen coordinated with her team to secure the perimeter. Dr. Wong worked alongside Louisa. Their combined expertise focused on understanding the extraordinary changes in Max's physiology. "These neural patterns," Dr. Wong explained, pointing to a complex readout, "they're unlike anything we've seen in canine subjects. The structure more closely resembles human neural activity." Max sat patiently through the examinations, his behavior becoming increasingly remarkable. When presented with a tablet displaying chemical formulas, he systematically identified specific compounds by touching them with his paw. Each compound he selected matched the unusual substances found in his blood work. "He's not just showing intelligence," Louisa observed. "He's demonstrating specific scientific knowledge that only someone with advanced pharmaceutical training would have." Mrs. Thompson, who had been allowed to stay as a material witness, suddenly remembered something. "Benjamin's last project," she said, her voice trembling with realization. "He called it Project Bridge. He said it would change everything we knew about consciousness, but he was terrified of what they might do with it." Parker, still under guard, shifted uncomfortably at the mention of Project Bridge. Agent Chen noticed his reaction and moved closer. "Mr. Parker, I think it's time you told us exactly what happened to Benjamin Stevens." The man's composure finally cracked. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The consciousness transfer was theoretical, a way to understand how human awareness could be expanded. Benjamin was brilliant. He saw possibilities no one else could see. But when he discovered they were planning to weaponize his research—" "Weaponize it how?" Agent Chen pressed. "Imagine soldiers with enhanced cognitive abilities or spies who could transfer their consciousness into animals for covert operations," Parker explained, his words coming faster now. Benjamin refused to continue. He threatened to expose everything. Then one night, there was an accident in the lab. Max suddenly became agitated, pawing at the tablet again. His movements were precise as he typed out another message. "No accident." Dr. Augusto, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "The night Benjamin disappeared, that's when they did it, wasn't it? They used his own research against him." Parker nodded slowly. "They didn't mean to make it permanent. It was just supposed to be a demonstration to show him that the process worked. But something went wrong. The transfer, it couldn't be reversed." The implications of his words hung heavy in the air. Louisa looked at Max, at Benjamin, with new understanding. "That's why your neural patterns are so unique," she said softly. "You're not just a dog with enhanced intelligence. You're Benjamin, trapped in Max's body." Max's tail wagged once in confirmation, his eyes showing a depth of human emotion that now made perfect sense. He moved to Mrs. Thompson, resting his head gently on her knee as tears streamed down her face. "But where's Max's original consciousness?" Dr. Wong asked, his scientific mind grappling with the ethical implications. "The process was supposed to be a merger," Parker explained. "A combination of human intelligence with animal instinct, but Benjamin's consciousness was too strong, too developed. He dominated the merge." Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an urgent message. "We've just received authorization to raid New Life's facilities," she announced, "but we'll need proof to connect them to Benjamin's disappearance." Max's ears perked up, and he moved purposefully to Dr. Augusto's computer. With remarkable dexterity, he began typing, "Lab 7 basement, hidden files. Access code, Bridge Project 37. Benjamin knew every detail of New Life's operation, Parker confirmed, resigned to his role in the revelation. He designed most of their security protocols himself. Dr. Augusto looked at the clock, noting that several hours had passed since Max's initial treatment. "We need to stabilize his condition," he reminded everyone. "Whatever consciousness inhabits this body, it's still under the influence of dangerous experimental compounds." Louisa was already preparing a specialized treatment protocol based on their newfound understanding of Max's unique physiology. "The compounds were designed to maintain the consciousness transfer," she explained. "Without them, there's a risk of—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The stakes were clear. They weren't just fighting to save a dog's life anymore. They were trying to preserve the only evidence of a breakthrough that could revolutionize science, and the only chance to bring justice for what had been done to Benjamin. As the federal agents prepared to move on New Life's facility, Dr. Augusto and Louisa focused on stabilizing their extraordinary patient. The small veterinary clinic in Monte Sereno had become ground zero for a discovery that would challenge the boundaries of scientific understanding and human consciousness itself. The evening cast long shadows through the clinic windows as Dr. Augusto and Louisa raced against time to stabilize Max's deteriorating condition. The revelation of his true identity as Benjamin had complicated their treatment options. They were now dealing with a unique hybrid of human consciousness and canine physiology. "His body is fighting the experimental compounds," Louisa explained to Agent Chen, who had remained behind while her team raided the New Life facility. "But these same compounds are what's maintaining the consciousness transfer. We're walking an incredibly fine line." Dr. Wong worked feverishly alongside them, his expertise in experimental genetics proving invaluable. "The merger of consciousness wasn't just a simple transfer," he explained, studying the latest test results. "It's created something entirely new. Look at these brainwave patterns. They're synchronizing in ways that should be impossible." Benjamin remained alert despite his physical distress, his eyes following their every movement with unmistakable human intelligence. Using the tablet they'd provided, he continued to communicate, sharing crucial information about the experiments that had transformed him. "The compounds aren't just maintaining the transfer," Louisa realized, reading his latest message. "They're evolving it. Each new iteration is creating stronger connections between the human and canine neural pathways." Mrs. Thompson, who had refused to leave Max's side, suddenly spoke up. "Benjamin once told me about his theories on consciousness. He said our understanding of awareness was too limited, that animals possessed forms of consciousness we'd barely begun to comprehend." Dr. Augusto nodded thoughtfully while preparing another treatment. "And now he's experiencing that directly, not just observing animal consciousness, but actually merging with it." An urgent call from Agent Chen's team at New Life interrupted their discussion. They had accessed Lab 7 and found exactly what Max had described. Hidden files detailing the entire Project Bridge experiment, but they'd also discovered something more disturbing. The company executives are trying to destroy evidence, Agent Chen reported, her voice tense. They're implementing some kind of emergency protocol. Dr. Wong, they're using terms like neural cascade and consciousness breakdown. Does that mean anything to you? The specialist's face paled. They're trying to sever the connection forcibly. If they trigger a neural cascade in their systems, he looked at Max with growing concern. As if on cue, Max's body began to tremor. His vital signs fluctuated wildly as the sophisticated equipment monitoring him lit up with warnings. Through it all, his eyes remained locked on Luisa's, filled with a very human fear. They're not just destroying evidence, Dr. Augusto realized. They're trying to eliminate the only living proof of their experiments. They must have built in some kind of fail-safe in the compound formulas. Luisa rushed to adjust Max's medication, her mind racing. We need to stabilize the neural pathways before they collapse, but without the original formula, Max struggled to his paws, fighting through the tremors to reach the tablet. His message was urgent. Second lab, private research, antidote. Benjamin had a private lab, Mrs. Thompson asked, surprised. He never mentioned... Wait, she continued, her eyes lighting up with memory. The old Anderson property. Benjamin leased the basement there last year. He said he needed a quiet place to think. Agent Chen was already on her phone, dispatching a team to the location. But Max's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The sophisticated monitoring equipment showed his neural patterns becoming increasingly erratic. We can't wait for them to find the antidote, Dr. Augusto declared. We need to stabilize him now. He turned to Dr. Wong. What do we know about consciousness anchoring? Is there any way to strengthen the neural connections temporarily? The specialist hesitated. Theoretically, strong emotional connections can help stabilize consciousness patterns. It's why familiar faces and voices can help coma patients. But in this case, we're dealing with something unprecedented. Mrs. Thompson moved closer to Max, her voice gentle as she began to talk about Benjamin's childhood, about his dreams and his courage. To everyone's amazement, his vital signs began to steady slightly. The human consciousness is responding to emotional anchors, Luisa observed. But look, the canine brain patterns are also stabilizing. It's as if both aspects of his consciousness are working together to maintain the connection. Dr. Augusto quickly adjusted their treatment strategy. Mrs. Thompson, keep talking to him. Luisa, help me prepare a neural stabilizer based on these new readings. If we can maintain this balance long enough for the team to find Benjamin's private research. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly as they worked, each moment critical in their race to save not just a life, but perhaps the most extraordinary consciousness ever documented. Outside, the sun had set completely, but the small veterinary clinic blazed with light and activity, a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. The emergency lights of federal vehicles illuminated the old Anderson property as agents swarmed the location. Inside the basement laboratory, they found exactly what Benjamin had prepared for, a hidden sanctuary of truth, meticulously documented and preserved. Dr. Wong, you need to see this. Agent Chen's voice crackled through the clinic's speakerphone. The formulas here, they're far beyond anything we found at New Life. Benjamin wasn't just trying to stop their experiments. He was working on a way to safely reverse the process. Back at the clinic, Luisa and Dr. Augusto continued their desperate efforts to stabilize Max's condition. The neural stabilizer had helped, but his vital signs remained dangerously erratic. Mrs. Thompson's constant stream of memories and encouragement seemed to be the only thing keeping him anchored. Look at these readings, Luisa pointed to the monitor. The human consciousness patterns are becoming more dominant. It's like Benjamin is fighting to protect his canine host, Dr. Wong, who was receiving real-time images of Benjamin's private research, suddenly straightened. This is remarkable. Benjamin didn't just theorize about consciousness transfer, he found a way to create a true symbiosis between human and animal awareness. The process New Life used was crude compared to his actual design. Max's eyes remained alert despite his physical distress. He managed to type another message: "Protect formula, help others." Others? Agent Chen's voice sharpened. Are you saying there are more test subjects? Before Max could respond, the monitoring equipment erupted in a cascade of alarms. His body went rigid as neural patterns spiked across all readings. "We're losing the stability," Luisa called out, rushing to adjust medications. "The connection between consciousnesses is starting to fragment." Dr. Augusto made a swift decision. "We need to risk the emergency protocol. Luisa, prepare for immediate neural pathway support. Dr. Wong, what have you found in Benjamin's research about consciousness anchoring?" "There's something here about harmonic neural resonance, Doctor," Wong replied, frantically scanning the documents being uncovered. "Benjamin theorized that consciousness exists on multiple frequencies. The key to stable transfer isn't dominance, but synchronization." Mrs. Thompson suddenly gasped. "The music! Benjamin always had classical music playing in his lab. He said it helped him think, helped him resonate." Luisa immediately pulled up a classical music playlist on the clinic's computer. As the first notes of Bach filled the room, something extraordinary happened. Max's neural readings began to stabilize, the patterns of human and canine consciousness starting to align in a more harmonious way. "It's working," Dr. Wong breathed, watching the readings. "The music is providing a shared pattern for both consciousnesses to follow. But we need more than just temporary stabilization." Agent Chen's team was still documenting the hidden lab, photographing everything they found. "There's a sealed container here," she reported. "It's marked with today's date and it's addressed to the Monte Sereno Veterinary Clinic." "He knew," Mrs. Thompson whispered, tears in her eyes. Somehow, Benjamin knew he would need help here. As agents rushed the container to the clinic, Dr. Augusto and Luisa prepared for what they hoped would be the final phase of treatment. The sealed package contained not just the antidote formula, but a detailed protocol for administering it. "Benjamin didn't just hide evidence here, Doctor," Wong realized, studying the documentation. He created a failsafe, a way to protect not just himself, but anyone else who might have been subjected to New Life's experiments. The night had grown deep, but no one in the clinic showed any sign of fatigue. They were witnessing something unprecedented, not just the struggle to save a unique consciousness, but perhaps the key to understanding consciousness itself in an entirely new way. As they prepared to administer Benjamin's carefully designed treatment, Max's eyes held a depth of understanding that transcended species. Through his ordeal, he had become living proof that consciousness was far more complex and beautiful than science had ever imagined. And in his determination to protect both his human and canine aspects, he was teaching them all something profound about the true nature of awareness and identity. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to illuminate the clinic windows as Dr. Augusto and Luisa prepared to administer Benjamin's treatment. The classical music continued to play, maintaining the delicate balance between the human and canine aspects of their extraordinary patient's consciousness. "The formula is incredibly complex," Dr. Wong observed, studying the detailed protocols Benjamin had left. "It's not designed to separate the consciousnesses. It's meant to stabilize them in perfect harmony. Benjamin found a way to preserve both beings." Luisa carefully prepared the series of injections, each one containing compounds that seemed to defy conventional biochemistry. "Look at how these molecules are structured," she said, showing Dr. Augusto the microscope display. "They're designed to work with both human and canine neural patterns simultaneously." Mrs. Thompson sat nearby, still providing a steady stream of emotional support through her presence and words. "Benjamin always said that animals had so much to teach us about consciousness," she recalled. He believed we'd limited ourselves by assuming human awareness was the only kind that mattered. As they began administering the treatment, Max's vital signs responded in fascinating ways. The monitoring equipment showed his neural patterns shifting and realigning, but instead of fighting each other, the human and canine aspects of his consciousness seemed to be finding a new way to coexist. The music isn't just acting as a stabilizer, Dr. Wong realized, watching the readings. It's providing a template for neural harmony. Both consciousnesses are learning to resonate at compatible frequencies. Agent Chen, who had returned from the hidden lab, stood watching the procedure with intense interest. The documents we found suggest Benjamin had discovered something revolutionary about the nature of consciousness itself. He wasn't just working on transfer technology, he was exploring the possibility of expanded awareness across species. Max remained calm throughout the treatment, his eyes showing a depth of understanding that seemed to encompass both human intelligence and canine intuition. Through the tablet, he typed out another message: both alive, both aware, both needed. The implications of this simple statement were profound. Benjamin hadn't been trapped or lost in the transfer. He had discovered a new state of being, a consciousness that transcended the boundaries between human and animal awareness. The neural patterns are stabilizing, Louisa announced, studying the monitors. But they're not returning to either human or canine baseline. They're establishing something entirely new. Dr. Augusto nodded thoughtfully. Because that's what Benjamin intended all along. He didn't want to dominate or suppress Max's consciousness. He wanted to achieve true symbiosis. As the treatment progressed, they began to notice subtle changes in Max's behavior. His responses became even more nuanced, combining human analytical thinking with canine emotional intelligence in ways that defied explanation. When Mrs. Thompson showed him an old photo of Benjamin's family, his reaction displayed both human recognition and canine empathy. The treatment isn't just preventing consciousness breakdown, Dr. Wong observed. It's actually enhancing the integration. Benjamin found a way to preserve and strengthen both forms of awareness simultaneously. Through the tablet, Max shared another insight. Consciousness not linear. Many layers, many truths. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with updates from her team. The raid on New Life had uncovered evidence of other experimental subjects, but none had achieved the remarkable synthesis they were witnessing in Max. Benjamin's private research was proving to be the key, not just to his own salvation, but potentially to helping others who had been subjected to the company's cruel experiments. Look at these brainwave patterns, Louisa pointed to the monitor. They're showing characteristics we've never seen before, like the human capacity for abstract thought, combining with the canine ability to process sensory information in multiple dimensions. Mrs. Thompson reached out to stroke Max's fur, and his response demonstrated this new integration perfectly. His tail wagged with genuine canine joy, while his eyes showed human recognition and gratitude. He was neither just human nor just dog. He had become something wonderfully, uniquely both. As the morning light grew stronger, the team continued to monitor the treatment's effects, all of them aware that they were witnessing something that would challenge and change our understanding of consciousness forever. In this small veterinary clinic, through Benjamin's brilliant research and sacrifice, a new frontier of awareness was being explored, one that suggested consciousness itself was far more fluid and interconnected than anyone had imagined. Word of the extraordinary events at Monte Sereno Veterinary Clinic had begun to spread through the small town. As morning turned to afternoon, a crowd of concerned citizens gathered outside, forming a protective circle around the clinic. They had heard fragments of the story about Benjamin's disappearance, New Life's unethical experiments, and the remarkable consciousness that now existed within Max. Inside, Dr. Augusto and his team continued to monitor Max's condition as his new integrated consciousness stabilized. The classical music still played softly in the background, now joined by the gentle murmur of supportive voices from outside. "The community's response is remarkable," Agent Chen observed, watching through the windows. "They're not just here out of curiosity, they're here to protect him." Luisa nodded, reviewing the latest test results. "The treatment is working better than we could have hoped. Both consciousness patterns are not just stable, they're thriving. It's as if they're learning from each other, growing stronger together." Through the tablet, Max shared his experience. Seeing world new way, human thoughts, canine senses, beautiful blend. Mrs. Thompson, who had finally been convinced to take a short rest, returned with fresh coffee for everyone. "The local news is here," she reported. "People want to know the truth about what New Life did. They want justice for Benjamin and for Max." Dr. Wong, who had been analyzing Benjamin's research files, looked up from his computer. "This goes beyond justice for one case," he said. "Benjamin's discoveries about consciousness could revolutionize our understanding of awareness, intelligence, and the connections between all living beings." As if to demonstrate this point, Max approached a young child who had been allowed inside with her mother, one of the clinic's regular clients. The child was autistic and usually struggled with social interactions, but Max engaged with her in a way that perfectly blended human patience with canine intuition. The girl, normally withdrawn, responded with unprecedented openness. "He's using both forms of consciousness to connect with her," Luisa observed, watching the interaction. The canine ability to sense emotional states combined with human understanding of neurodiversity. Agent Chen's team had finished securing Benjamin's private laboratory and was now coordinating with other agencies to investigate similar cases across the country. "We've identified 3 other facilities where New Life conducted consciousness experiments," she reported. "But none of them had access to Benjamin's refined process." Through the tablet, Max conveyed his concern. "Must help others, share knowledge safely." The implications were clear. Benjamin's research couldn't be kept secret. It had too much potential to help people, but it also couldn't fall into the wrong hands again. The solution came from an unexpected source. "The university's ethics board," Mrs. Thompson suggested. "Benjamin always said they were the only institutional body he truly trusted. They could oversee the research, ensure it's used properly." Dr. Augusto agreed. With federal oversight and public transparency, no more hidden labs or secret experiments. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Local animal rights activists had arrived, along with families whose pets had been treated at the clinic over the years. They set up a volunteer schedule to ensure the clinic would be monitored around the clock until the situation was fully resolved. "Look at this," Luisa called out, pointing to the newest brain scans. "The integration is reaching new levels. The human capacity for abstract thought is enhancing the canine instincts, while the canine emotional intelligence is deepening the human consciousness." Max moved to the window, observing the gathering crowd. His posture showed canine alertness, while his eyes reflected human understanding. Through the tablet, he expressed a profound insight. Not just two minds, new way of being. Bridge between worlds. Dr. Wong, still studying Benjamin's research, nodded in agreement. "He's right. This isn't just about consciousness transfer anymore. Benjamin discovered a way to expand the very nature of awareness itself. The implications for understanding intelligence, emotion, and consciousness are staggering." As the afternoon progressed, more evidence of New Life's unethical practices emerged, but so did more signs of hope. The community's protective response showed the best of human nature, while Max's unique consciousness demonstrated the potential for understanding between species. Local businesses began sending food and supplies to the clinic's staff and the gathered supporters. Children made signs showing their support for Max and the clinic team. What had started as a medical emergency had transformed into a movement, a stand for ethical science and the protection of all forms of consciousness. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues as news crews gathered outside the Monte Sereno veterinary clinic. The story had captured national attention, a groundbreaking scientific discovery, corporate misconduct, and the extraordinary consciousness that bridged the gap between human and animal awareness. Inside, Dr. Augusto and Luisa were reviewing the final results of Max's treatment. The integration of consciousnesses had stabilized completely, creating something unprecedented in scientific history, a harmonious blend of human intellect and canine sensibility. The University Ethics Board representatives will be here tomorrow morning, Agent Chen announced, ending a phone call. They've already reviewed Benjamin's research and are preparing protocols for its ethical application. Through the tablet, Max shared his thoughts. Knowledge must help heal, not harm. Bridge understanding. Dr. Wong, who had been compiling data from the case, looked up from his computer. The implications of Benjamin's research go far beyond what New Life ever imagined. This isn't just about consciousness transfer. It's about expanding our understanding of awareness itself. Mrs. Thompson, surrounded by old photos and documents, had been helping piece together the full story of Benjamin's work. He always said that animals had a type of wisdom we'd forgotten how to access. Now he's living proof of that truth. The monitoring equipment continued to show the remarkable harmony of Max's dual consciousness. The classical music still played softly, but it was no longer needed to maintain stability. The integration had become self-sustaining, creating its own natural rhythm. Louisa observed Max's interaction with a therapy dog that had been brought in to provide comfort to the gathered crowd. The way he communicated with the other dog demonstrated something extraordinary. He was able to shift seamlessly between human and canine modes of interaction, creating a bridge between species that had never existed before. "Look at this," she called to Dr. Augusto, pointing to the neural activity readings. He's not switching between consciousnesses, they're working together simultaneously. The human ability to analyze and theorize is combining with the canine capacity for emotional and sensory awareness. Agent Chen received another update from her team. The investigation into New Life had uncovered a network of research facilities, but thanks to Benjamin's foresight in documenting everything, they had all the evidence needed to bring those responsible to justice. "The company executives are being taken into custody," she reported, "and we've located all their test subjects. With Benjamin's research, we can help them too." Through the tablet, Max expressed his relief. "Others will be safe now. No more hidden labs, no more fear." The crowd outside had grown into a peaceful vigil. People brought their pets, sensing somehow that this moment marked a turning point in our understanding of the bonds between humans and animals. Local musicians had set up nearby, playing gentle melodies that seemed to bridge the gap between species in their own way. Dr. Augusto watched as Max moved among the gathered people and animals, his unique consciousness allowing him to connect with each in profound ways. Benjamin didn't just discover a new scientific principle, he observed. He found a way to expand the very nature of empathy and understanding. Mrs. Thompson smiled through tears as she watched Max comfort a frightened cat that had been brought to the clinic. He's showing us what Benjamin always believed, that consciousness isn't limited by form. It's about connection, understanding, and growth. The University Ethics Board had already begun drafting guidelines for the application of Benjamin's research. Their focus wasn't on consciousness transfer, but on using his discoveries to enhance communication and understanding between species, to help animals with neurological conditions and to develop new therapies for humans with cognitive and emotional challenges. As night fell over Monte Sereno, the small veterinary clinic had become more than just a medical facility. It was now a symbol of hope and transformation. The crowd outside maintained their vigil, their presence a testament to the community's commitment to protecting this remarkable breakthrough. Through the tablet, Max shared a profound observation. Consciousness not about control, about harmony, growth, understanding, human and animal together. The monitoring equipment continued to show stable readings, but they were unlike anything seen before in either human or canine subjects. The integration had created something entirely new, a consciousness that could truly bridge worlds, offering insights that could transform our understanding of awareness, intelligence, and the connections between all living beings. 3 months after the extraordinary events at Monte Sereno Veterinary Clinic, the small town had transformed into a center for revolutionary research in animal-human understanding. The clinic, now partnered with the university, had become a beacon of hope for both scientific advancement and ethical research. Max, whose unique consciousness had stabilized beautifully, had become an ambassador for a new era of understanding between species. The integration of Benjamin's human intelligence with Max's canine awareness had created something truly remarkable. A bridge between worlds that was helping transform our understanding of consciousness itself. The results have exceeded all expectations, Dr. Wong explained to the gathered international research team. The harmonious integration of human and canine consciousness has revealed neural pathways we never knew existed. It's revolutionizing our approach to both human and veterinary medicine. Dr. Augusto and Luisa had expanded the clinic to include a research wing, where they worked alongside university scientists to apply Benjamin's discoveries in ethical ways. The focus wasn't on consciousness transfer, but on enhancing communication and understanding between species. "Watch this," Luisa said, demonstrating their latest breakthrough. Max was working with a group of therapy animals, his unique ability to communicate across species barriers, helping train them for work with special needs children. His combined consciousness allowed him to understand both human needs and animal responses in ways that were transforming therapeutic practices. Mrs. Thompson, who had become an integral part of the clinic's outreach program, smiled as she watched Max interact with a young autism patient. Benjamin always said that animals had so much to teach us. Now his discovery is helping prove that in ways even he couldn't have imagined. The New Life executives had faced justice, their unethical experiments exposed. More importantly, with Benjamin's research now properly supervised by the University Ethics Board, the other test subjects had received proper treatment. While none had achieved the remarkable synthesis that Max embodied, all had been helped by the gentle, ethical application of Benjamin's protocols. Through the tablet he still used to communicate complex thoughts, Max shared his perspective. Consciousness is infinite garden, many flowers, all connected. Human and animal, one symphony. Agent Chen, visiting to check on their progress, watched as Max demonstrated an extraordinary ability to detect early signs of illness in other animals, combining human analytical skills with canine sensory awareness. "Your work here is changing everything we thought we knew about consciousness and connection," she observed. The community had remained steadfastly supportive. The clinic's weekly educational sessions were always full, with people eager to learn about the new frontiers of human-animal understanding. Children especially were drawn to Max, intuitively grasping the beauty of his unique consciousness. "We're not just treating animals anymore," Dr. Augusto explained to a visiting journalist. "We're learning from them, understanding consciousness in ways that bridge the gap between species." Benjamin's discovery showed us that awareness isn't limited by form, it's enhanced by connection. As the sun set on another remarkable day at the clinic, Max sat with Mrs. Thompson in the garden they'd planted in Benjamin's honor. Through him, Benjamin's dream of expanding human understanding had been realized in ways that would benefit both humans and animals for generations to come. The story of Max and Benjamin isn't just about scientific discovery, Louisa reflected, watching them from the clinic window. It's about the power of consciousness to transcend boundaries, about the endless possibilities when we open our minds to new ways of understanding. Through the tablet, Max shared one final insight. Every consciousness precious, every connection sacred. Together we learn, together we grow. Together we understand. The Monte Sereno Veterinary Clinic had become more than just a place of healing. It was now a symbol of hope, understanding, and the boundless potential of consciousness itself. In the end, Benjamin's greatest discovery wasn't just about bridging the gap between human and animal awareness. It was about revealing the beautiful truth that consciousness, in all its forms, is part of a greater whole, waiting to be understood and celebrated. Dear listeners, we hope the extraordinary story of Max and Benjamin has touched your hearts and opened your minds to new possibilities. Their journey represents not just a scientific breakthrough, but a testament to the incredible bonds between humans and animals. To continue exploring these amazing connections, we've prepared a special playlist of equally inspiring stories that highlight the remarkable relationships between different species. You'll find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore the complexity and beauty of life, consciousness, and the connections that unite all living beings. Join us in the comment section to share your thoughts and experiences with animal-human bonds. Together, we can continue to learn, understand, and grow.